She pointed at my car and yelled, "Tow it right now," like she owned the street, and 10 minutes later, my truck was gone. I didn't shout, I didn't beg, I just stood there with my hands in my pockets while she smiled like she'd won something big. She waved a clipboard in my face and said my vehicle ruined the community image, then leaned closer and whispered that if I complained again, she'd have my house fined next. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Nobody said a word. My daughter asked why they took our car, and that's when something inside me went quiet. Karen didn't know it yet, but she had just touched the one thing she shouldn't have. I walked to the curb where my truck used to be and saw the orange tow stickers still stuck to the asphalt. She followed me, heels clicking, still talking, still enjoying it. She said the HOA rules were clear, said she had full authority, said I was lucky she didn't call the police, too. I asked her one simple thing. Who signed the tow order? She laughed and said, "I did, that's all you need to know." Then she pulled out her phone and started recording me, hoping I'd snap. I didn't. I just smiled back. That confused her. What she didn't know was the truck wasn't just a truck, it was registered, insured, and parked legally on land that didn't belong to the HOA at all. She also didn't know I had already made one call while she was busy showing off, not to a lawyer, not to the police, to someone who owed me a favor from a long time ago, back when rules were different and mistakes cost lives. By the time the sun dipped low, Karen was still pacing the street, telling anyone who would listen that she put a troublemaker in his place. She didn't notice the low rumble at first. Nobody did. It felt more than sounded, like the ground itself was waking up. Conversations stopped, birds lifted off the trees. Karen turned around, annoyed, ready to yell at whoever dared drive through her neighborhood. That's when it appeared at the end of the road. Slow, wide, steel. 25 tons of armored metal rolled forward like it owned the earth beneath it, tracks grinding, engine growling, American flags stitched on the side, faded but proud. Karen's phone slipped from her hand. Someone whispered, "Is that a tank?" And for the first time all day, Karen didn't have a single word to say. I leaned down to my daughter and said quietly, "Don't worry, they're just here to pick something up." And this was only the beginning. The tank stopped right where my truck used to be, metal tracks resting on the same curb Karen swore I wasn't allowed to touch. The engine stayed running, deep and steady, like it was breathing. Karen snapped out of her freeze and started screaming that this was a private HOA road, that military vehicles were not permitted, that someone needed to call the police right now. She ran toward the tank, waving her clipboard like a weapon, completely missing how every neighbor had stepped outside now. Phones were up, faces were pale. Nobody was on her side anymore. A hatch opened on top of the tank with a slow metallic creak. A man stood up, calm, wearing plain clothes, not a uniform, but the way he moved made people straighten without knowing why. He looked at Karen, then at me, and gave a small nod like we'd already finished this conversation hours ago. Karen demanded his name, his badge, his authority. She said she would have him arrested for intimidation and property damage. He didn't answer her. Instead, he asked me one question. Was this the vehicle they took? I said yes. That's when Karen lost control. She started yelling that I was harassing the community, that I had threatened her earlier, that she had it all on video. She claimed my car was abandoned, unsafe, and illegally parked, and that the tow company acted under her legal order. What she didn't expect was the man on the tank pulling out a tablet and calmly asking her which part of the footage she wanted him to play first. Her smile cracked, just a little. He turned the screen so everyone could see. It showed Karen pointing at my truck, laughing, saying, "Tow it anyway, I'll handle him." Clear audio, clear face, clear timestamp. Then another clip, her telling the tow driver the land belonged to the HOA, even though the survey map popped up right after, showing the boundary line stopping 5 feet short of my tires. A quiet wave of shock moved through the crowd. Karen tried to say it was edited, that it was fake, That's when she realized I was still standing there, relaxed, not surprised at all. She asked me how I got the footage. I told her I didn't. She gave it to me months ago when she forced the HOA to install security cameras for safety. Cameras I legally had access to because my name was still on the original land trust. That part made her step back. Then the tow truck came back down the street. Karen smiled again, thinking help had arrived. She waved like a queen, calling her servant. But the driver didn't look at her. He parked behind the tank and walked straight to me, holding a clipboard with shaking hands. He said he was told to release the vehicle immediately. He said there was a serious mistake. Karen shouted that she never approved that. The driver swallowed hard and said, "Ma'am, I just got off the phone with the real owner of this road." That word hit her wrong. Owner. She asked, "What do you mean, owner?" I didn't answer. The man on the tank did, and when he said it, Karen's world started to fall apart. He told her the road wasn't HOA property, wasn't city property either, and never had been. It was private access land, granted temporary use decades ago under a forgotten agreement the HOA never bothered to renew. The words didn't sound dramatic, but the effect was instant. Karen's face drained as she tried to laugh it off, saying paperwork could be fixed, fines could be issued, and she'd call her HOA lawyer in the morning. The man on the tank shook his head slowly and said the agreement expired last year and the renewal was denied. By me. That's when the whispers turned loud. People started asking questions out in the open now. Why were they paying HOA fees for a road they didn't own? Why was Karen making legal threats she couldn't back up? She snapped at them to stay out of it, reminding everyone she was the president. The word president didn't hold the same weight anymore, not with 25 tons of steel sitting behind her and proof playing on repeat. Karen tried one last move. She pulled her phone up again and called the police, telling them there was an armed military vehicle threatening the neighborhood and an aggressive homeowner refusing to comply. She said she feared for her safety. She made sure to say my name. She made sure to sound scared. When she hung up, she looked at me with that same smug look she had when my truck disappeared. The sirens came faster than she expected. 2 squad cars rolled in and blocked the street. Officers stepped out, hands near their belts, eyes locked on the tank. Karen rushed over, talking fast, pointing, saying I intimidated her, saying I brought in military force to scare residents. She said I should be arrested immediately. One officer held up a hand and asked her to slow down. Then he turned to me and asked a very different question. "Sir, are you the property holder for this access road?" I said yes. Karen spun around so fast she almost fell. She shouted that I was lying, that she had documents, that the HOA owned everything past the sidewalk. The officer asked to see her proof. She opened her folder with shaking fingers and handed it over. He studied it for less than 10 seconds before handing it back. He said the map was outdated and the parcel number didn't match the county records anymore. Karen's voice cracked as she asked what that meant. It meant she had no authority. The officer then asked who authorized the tow. Karen proudly said she did. That answer changed the tone instantly. He asked if she knew towing a legally parked vehicle from private land without consent was a criminal offense. Her mouth opened, then closed. She tried to say she believed she had the right. The officer nodded slowly and said belief doesn't replace law. That's when the second officer spoke up. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at Karen. She looked smaller now, no clipboard, no crowd backing her, just fear. I said yes. And just like that, Karen realized this wasn't about a car anymore. Karen started crying the moment the word charges landed. Loud, shaky sobs, hands over her face, telling everyone she was being attacked for doing her job. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but nobody stepped forward this time. The officer didn't comfort her. He asked for her ID. Then he asked for the HOA bylaws she claimed gave her towing power. She fumbled through her folder again, papers slipping onto the ground, the same ground she once said I wasn't allowed to stand on. While she searched, the tow driver quietly rolled my truck back into its spot, right in front of her. The sound of the tires touching the curb felt louder than the tank. My daughter smiled for the first time that day. Karen saw it, and that somehow made her angrier than the arrest talk. She snapped that I planned all of this, that the tank was a threat, that I was abusing power. The officer asked her who owned the tank. She said she didn't know. He looked at me. I told him it wasn't military property anymore. It was mine. Bought legally, restored legally, registered legally. A demilitarized vehicle, used for shows and charity events. Perfectly allowed on private land. Karen laughed through her tears and said there was no way someone like me could own something like that. She said I didn't look like that kind of person. That line did it. The officer asked what she meant. Karen tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Phones caught everything. Neighbors murmured again, this time sharper. The man from the tank stepped down and handed the officer a folder. Inside were permits, titles, and one more thing Karen had never seen, a signed access revocation notice, effective immediately. The HOA's right to use the road was suspended due to harassment, fraud, and illegal enforcement actions. Karen screamed that she'd sue. The man calmly said she could try, but the lawsuit would be against me, not the HOA, because the HOA didn't own the road, never did. They just pretended long enough that nobody questioned it. That's when the officer told her to turn around. The cuffs didn't click yet, but the sound of metal was close enough. Karen looked straight at me and asked why I was doing this. I leaned in just enough for her to hear and said, "You didn't tow a car, you crossed a line." And somewhere behind us, the tank engine shut off. The silence that followed was heavy and full of consequences. The silence didn't last long. Karen tried to pull away when the officer reached for her arm, saying she felt faint, saying she needed water, saying this was all a misunderstanding. The officer didn't rush her, but he didn't let go either. He asked her one last time if she wanted to change her statement about authorizing the tow. She looked around, searching for support, but all she saw were neighbors filming and shaking their heads. Her voice dropped when she said no. She stood by her decision. That choice sealed everything. Another police car arrived, then a county vehicle right behind it. The mood shifted again. This wasn't just a neighborhood problem anymore. A man from the county stepped out, older, calm, and walked straight to me. He said he recognized my name. That caught Karen's attention. He said my family had held that land since before the HOA even existed, that the access road was meant to be shared, not controlled. Karen's knees buckled slightly when she heard that. She had spent years acting like a ruler on land she never owned. The county official asked Karen if she knew about the revocation notice. She said no. He said it was mailed, emailed, and delivered by certified notice. She claimed she never saw it. He nodded and said ignoring it didn't make it disappear. He then told her that every fine, tow, and threat issued after that date was illegal, retroactively illegal. That word hit hard. Neighbors started whispering about refunds, lawsuits, and audits. Karen's crying stopped. Her face went blank. One neighbor finally spoke up, then another. Stories came out fast. Cars towed without warning, threats over trash cans, a single mother fined for chalk drawings, a veteran warned not to cause trouble. Karen tried to interrupt, but the officer told her to stay quiet. Each story stacked on top of the last, and with every one, her power slipped further away. The county official turned to the officers and said this was no longer just a towing issue. It was fraud, misuse of authority, and possible impersonation of legal power. Karen whispered that she was just enforcing rules. He answered calmly, "Rules don't exist without rights." Then he nodded to the officer. This time, the cuffs clicked. Karen gasped as the cold metal closed around her wrists. The sound echoed down the street. Phones zoomed in. Her HOA badge fell from her jacket and landed near my tire. Nobody picked it up. As she was led toward the squad car, she turned and shouted that this neighborhood would fall apart without her. No one replied. I looked at my daughter and told her to get in the truck. She asked if the tank was going to leave. I smiled and said, "Not yet. there was still one more thing to finish, and Karen still didn't know what it was. As Karen was placed in the back of the squad car, the county official cleared his throat and asked everyone to stay where they were. That alone raised the tension again. People thought it was over. It wasn't. He said there was an open matter connected to the HOA, something paused months ago because the board refused access to records. With Karen detained, that excuse was gone. He asked who the vice president was. No one answered. He asked who handled the money. Silence again. Faces started to look worried. He then said something that made the whole street go still. He said the HOA account had been flagged for unusual transfers, large ones, money moving out, not into maintenance or repairs, but into a private account under a name almost identical to Karen's, just spelled slightly wrong. A few neighbors gasped. One man cursed under his breath. Karen slammed her fist against the squad car window and screamed that it was a lie. The officer told her to calm down. The county official looked at me and asked if I wanted to allow temporary access to the road for residents while the investigation continued. I said yes, not for the HOA, for the families. That earned a few quiet nods. Then he asked if I'd be willing to testify if charges expanded. I said I already had a folder ready. That surprised him. It shouldn't have. I'd been collecting things for a long time. Notices, threats, emails, recordings. Not for revenge, for the day someone finally pushed too far. Karen shouted my name from inside the car and demanded to know how long I'd been planning this. I walked closer, just close enough for her to hear, and told her the truth. I wasn't planning anything. I was waiting for her to break the law so badly that even she couldn't talk her way out. Her eyes widened when she realized it wasn't the tank that ended her, it was her own pattern. The tank's hatch opened again. The man inside announced he needed to move it before sunset. He asked the officer where to park. The officer smiled slightly and pointed to the wide, empty lot at the HOA entrance, the same lot Karen once threatened to tow anyone from. The tank rolled forward and parked dead center, perfectly legal, perfectly still. The county official told the neighbors there would be a full audit, refunds where owed, and new leadership chosen under supervision. Someone asked if the HOA could even survive this. He said maybe, maybe not. That part depended on how honest people wanted to be going forward. As the squad car door closed, Karen screamed one last time that I thought I was powerful. I didn't answer her. I buckled my daughter in, started the truck, and felt something lift off my chest that had been there for years. Freedom doesn't make noise when it arrives, but justice sometimes rolls in on tracks. The tank stayed parked overnight, quiet and unmoving, like a reminder nobody wanted to test. By morning, the story had already spread past the neighborhood. News vans showed up, not because of me, but because people love seeing fake power fall apart. Karen's name was everywhere. Former HOA president, arrested, under investigation. The same woman who once threatened to fine people for lawn height was now being questioned about stolen funds and fake authority. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. That afternoon, a lawyer showed up at my door. Clean suit, careful words. He said he represented the HOA board, or what was left of it. He asked if I'd reconsider the access revocation, said the community couldn't function without that road. I told him I'd think about it. He smiled like that was a win. Before he left, he casually mentioned something else, that Karen claimed I had planned the tank arrival to intimidate her, that she was pushing for charges against me once she got out. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was desperate. 2 hours later, the same officer from the night before returned, this time with paperwork. He said Karen had officially accused me of harassment, threats, and misuse of military equipment. He also said something important right after that. Every claim was already falling apart. Why? Because Karen forgot one thing. The entire street had cameras, not just HOA ones, private ones, ring cams, dash cams, a full timeline showing she ordered the tow first, threatened fines, lied to police, and only then did the tank arrive, after my property was violated. The officer told me Karen's new charges would likely add to her case, not help it. Filing a false report while under investigation didn't play well in court. I nodded. I'd seen that before. People like her always think doubling down will save them. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A woman's voice, tired and angry, asked if I was the man with the tank. I said yes. She said she was Karen's sister. She asked what I wanted to make this go away. That question said everything. I told her nothing. It was already gone. Then I hung up. The next morning, a court order came through. Temporary control of the HOA was suspended. All enforcement actions frozen. Karen was denied bail pending further review due to financial risk. When I read that part, I sat down, not from shock, but from relief. I walked outside and saw kids riding bikes in the street again. No fear, no whistles, no notices taped to doors, just people living. One neighbor walked up and said, "Guess the HOA picked the wrong guy." I shook my head and answered with the only truth that mattered. They thought power was a clipboard. I showed them it was the law. And that's when I realized something else. This story wasn't over yet. A week later, I stood in a quiet courtroom while Karen sat at the defense table, smaller than I remembered, eyes fixed on the floor. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He read facts, dates, videos, bank transfers, false reports, illegal tows, abuse of authority. Each word landed clean and heavy. When he said the HOA's actions violated basic property rights, a murmur rolled through the room. When he said Karen was barred from holding any HOA position again, forever, she finally looked up. When he added restitution, fines, and probation with possible prison time pending trial, her shoulders dropped, like something inside her had snapped. Outside, cameras waited. I didn't stop. I didn't pose. I just walked past with my daughter's hand in mine. Later that day, I signed a new access agreement. Fair, clear, and public. The road stayed open. Fees dropped. A temporary board took over under county watch. Refund checks went out. Rules got simple. People breathed again. The tank left quietly at sunset. Tracks clean. Flag still stitched on the side. It had done its job without firing a shot. That night, I parked my truck in the same spot Karen once claimed as hers. I sat for a moment with the engine off, listening to the neighborhood sound normal. Laughter, a dog barking, wind in trees, no whistles, no threats, no fake power. My daughter asked if anyone would ever tow our car again. I told her not without asking first, and if they did, the law would answer. I didn't fight for attention. I didn't fight to scare anyone. I fought because land matters, family matters, truth matters, and because nobody gets to tell you you're small on your own ground. The sign at the entrance was changed the next morning. It didn't list fines or warnings anymore. It just said, "Private road, respect required." That was enough, because real power doesn't shout. It shows up and lets justice do the talking.